The first hint of dawn, a soft, pearlescent gray, would creep through the heavy curtains of John's bedroom, not with an alarm's jarring insistence, but with a gentle, almost apologetic nudge. John, a man whose life was dedicated to the quiet, often overlooked art of guiding others into slumber, rarely needed an external summons. His internal clock, honed by years of listening to the rhythms of the sleeping world, was as precise as any timepiece. He'd stir before the city truly awoke, before the rumble of the first delivery trucks or the distant wail of an early ambulance. His movements were deliberate, unhurried, like a slow exhale. His routine was a meticulously crafted symphony of calm. First, a glass of cool water, no ice, just pure, clear liquid to gently awaken his system. Then a quiet walk around his small, impeccably tidy apartment. He'd check the humidity levels, adjust the thermostat by a fraction of a degree, and ensure the blackout blinds were perfectly aligned. Every detail was considered, every potential disruption minimized. His home was a sanctuary, not just for himself, but as a testament to the principles he championed: order, tranquility, and the profound power of a well-rested mind. Breakfast was a simple affair: a bowl of plain oatmeal, perhaps a few unsalted almonds, and a cup of chamomile tea, brewed precisely for 4 minutes. He avoided caffeine, sugar, and anything that could introduce an unnecessary jolt to his system. His meals were designed to be grounding, to promote a sense of calm that would carry him through his day. He believed that the seeds of good sleep were sown long before one even thought about closing their eyes. John wasn't a doctor, nor a therapist, though his work often touched upon the edges of both. He was a sleep herder. The term itself was one he'd coined, a gentle self-deprecation for a profession that many found peculiar, even nonsensical. He didn't prescribe medication or offer deep psychological analysis. Instead, John helped people find their way back to sleep, not through force or manipulation, but through understanding, guidance, and the creation of optimal conditions. His clients ranged from stressed executives struggling with insomnia to new parents battling exhaustion, from artists seeking creative clarity to individuals simply lost in the fog of chronic fatigue. His workday typically began around mid-morning, after he had allowed ample time for his own body to fully awaken and settle. His first appointment might be with Mrs. Gable, an elderly woman who described her nights as a battlefield of tossing and turning. John would arrive at her home, his presence immediately exuding a quiet confidence. He wouldn't rush her. He'd listen patiently as she recounted the specifics of her sleeplessness, her voice often trembling with frustration. He'd observe her surroundings, noting the harsh overhead lights, the cluttered nightstand, the ticking clock that seemed to punctuate every lost hour. "Mrs. Gable," he'd say softly, his voice a gentle balm, "that clock, does it? Does it tend to catch your attention when you wake in the night?" She nodded, her eyes wide. "Oh, yes, Mr. John. Every time I wake up, there it is, mocking me with the minutes passing." John would offer a gentle smile. "Perhaps, for a short while, we could try covering it, just to see if the gentle passage of time becomes less of a focal point." He'd then proceed to suggest small, manageable changes: a softer bedside lamp, a slightly cooler room temperature, a routine of gentle stretching before bed. He never demanded radical overhauls. His philosophy was one of incremental adjustments, of guiding people back to their natural sleep cycles, rather than imposing artificial ones. His afternoons might be spent with a young graphic designer, Liam, who suffered from vivid, anxiety-inducing dreams that left him exhausted and creatively blocked. Liam's problem wasn't falling asleep, but staying asleep and waking refreshed. John would spend hours with Liam, not analyzing the dreams themselves, but exploring the underlying anxieties that fueled them. He'd guide Liam through mindfulness exercises, teaching him to observe his thoughts without judgment, to gently detach from the racing mind. He'd introduce Liam to techniques for lucid dreaming, not for the thrill of control, but as a way to understand and eventually reframe the narrative of his subconscious. "Think of your dreams, Liam," John would explain, his voice calm and even, "as stories your mind is telling itself. Sometimes those stories are frightening, but they are still just stories. Your job isn't to fight them, but to observe them, to understand their characters, and perhaps to gently suggest a different ending." He had a knack for making the abstract tangible. For Liam, he created a dream journal with a specific set of prompts designed to help him process his nighttime experiences. He encouraged Liam to associate certain scents, lavender, sandalwood, with relaxation, subtly influencing his subconscious environment. Lunch was often a solitary affair, taken at a quiet park bench or a small, unassuming cafe. John valued this time for reflection. He'd review his morning sessions, jotting down observations in his own, more detailed notebook, noting patterns, successes, and areas that required further exploration. He treated each client as a unique puzzle, a complex ecosystem of habits, anxieties, and environmental factors that all contributed to their sleep patterns. The late afternoons were often dedicated to research. John was a voracious reader, not of popular sleep fads, but of scientific studies, historical texts on sleep practices, and even poetry that captured the essence of rest and dreams. He believed in a holistic approach, understanding that sleep was influenced by everything from diet and exercise to emotional well-being, and the very light exposure one received throughout the day. He'd delve into the circadian rhythms of various cultures, explore the ancient practices of monastic orders, and study the latest findings on the impact of blue light on melatonin production. His evening routine was as carefully structured as his morning. A light, easily digestible dinner, prepared with the same mindful intention as his breakfast. No screens for at least an hour before bed. Instead, he'd engage in activities that promoted relaxation, reading physical books, listening to calming instrumental music, or practicing gentle Tai Chi movements. His apartment by evening transformed into a haven of soft light and hushed tranquility. His work wasn't always about solving acute problems. Sometimes, clients simply sought to deepen their relationship with sleep, to move beyond mere unconsciousness to a state of true restorative rest. For these individuals, John introduced concepts like sleep hygiene, the importance of a consistent sleep schedule, and the art of creating a wind-down ritual. He emphasized that sleep wasn't a luxury, but a fundamental biological necessity, as crucial as breathing or eating. One of his most challenging clients had been a young CEO, perpetually wired, perpetually stressed, who viewed sleep as a sign of weakness. He'd come to John as a last resort, his performance suffering, his health deteriorating. John spent weeks patiently explaining the science behind sleep deprivation, the cognitive impairments, the hormonal disruptions. He didn't preach, he educated. He presented data, cited studies, and gently guided the CEO towards understanding that rest was not an absence of productivity, but a prerequisite for it. It was a slow, arduous process, but eventually, the CEO began to tentatively embrace John's recommendations, starting with a mere 10 minutes of quiet reflection before bed. John's evenings often concluded with his own personal ritual, a cup of warm, non-caffeinated herbal infusion, and the reading of a few pages from a book unrelated to sleep. He found that immersing himself in different narratives helped to quiet his analytical mind, allowing him to transition more smoothly into sleep. He'd often read classic literature or historical accounts, stories that transported him away from the intricate mechanics of slumber and into the broader tapestry of human experience. He rarely discussed the specifics of his clients' struggles, maintaining a strict code of confidentiality. But the triumphs, the moments when a client's sleep transformed from a source of dread to a wellspring of rejuvenation, stayed with him. He saw himself as a facilitator, a guide who helped people rediscover a natural rhythm they had lost, a forgotten language their bodies already knew. His work was quiet, often solitary, and rarely glamorous. There were no dramatic interventions, no sudden cures. It was a process of patient observation, gentle guidance, and the cultivation of mindful habits. Yet for John, it was profoundly rewarding. He witnessed firsthand the transformative power of rest, the way a well-slept mind could unlock creativity, resilience, and a deeper appreciation for life. As he prepared for bed each night, John would perform his own wind-down routine. A warm shower, a few pages of his book, and then, finally, the quiet darkness of his bedroom. He'd lie down, not with anticipation of struggle, but with a sense of calm readiness. He understood the intricacies of sleep, the delicate balance of hormones, the complex interplay of environmental factors, and the profound psychological influences. But he also respected its mystery, its innate ability to restore and refresh. He would close his eyes, not forcing sleep, but inviting it. He'd focus on his breath, the gentle rise and fall of his chest, letting go of the day's observations and analyses. He was John, the sleep herder, and in the quiet stillness of the night, he too found his own peaceful journey into the land of dreams, ready to wake refreshed and guide others back to their own restful shores. His life was a testament to the fact that even the most ordinary of tasks, approached with intention and care, could hold a profound significance, a quiet power to transform lives, one gentle night's sleep at a time. The gentle hum of the city outside, a sound that might disturb others, was for John a distant, fading lullaby, a signal that the world was settling, just as he was, into the restorative embrace of sleep. He found a quiet satisfaction in this shared rhythm, a sense of purpose in his role as a guardian of this essential, universal human experience. His day ended not with a flourish, but with a serene surrender to the natural cycle, a quiet testament to the profound power of rest. The following morning, John's routine began precisely as the one before, a testament to his commitment to consistency. The pearlescent gray of dawn was his cue, and he rose with the quiet efficiency of a seasoned craftsman. His walk around the apartment was a silent inspection, a check of the subtle atmospheric conditions that contributed to his own well-being, and by extension, informed his practice. The humidity was optimal, the temperature a steady, cool 70 degrees Fahrenheit, the blackout blinds ensuring absolute darkness. These weren't just personal preferences. They were data points, observations gathered over years of personal and professional experience, forming the bedrock of his methodology. His breakfast, the plain oatmeal and chamomile tea, was prepared with the same mindful precision. He believed that the act of preparing one's food could be a form of meditation, a way to anchor oneself in the present moment. The avoidance of stimulants wasn't about deprivation, but about a conscious choice to cultivate a state of inner calm, a baseline tranquility that would serve him throughout the day. By mid-morning, he was ready to receive his clients, his mind clear, his energy focused. His first appointment was a stark contrast to his own ordered existence. Ms. Anya Sharma, a vibrant, high-powered lawyer, arrived with a palpable aura of restless energy. Her problem wasn't a lack of sleep, but a constant state of hyperarousal that made true rest feel like an alien concept. She'd fall asleep quickly, often from sheer exhaustion, only to wake hours later with her mind racing, replaying case details, strategizing for the next day, or caught in a loop of anxious thoughts. "John," she began, her voice rapid, almost breathless, "I'm tired. So tired. But my brain just won't shut off. It's like a horse that's bolted from the stable and refuses to be caught." John listened intently, his gaze steady and reassuring. He observed the slight tremor in her hands, the way her eyes darted around his serene living room, searching for an anchor. "Ms. Sharma," he said gently, "your mind is incredibly powerful, incredibly adept at its work. We're not trying to shut it off, but perhaps to guide its energy, to help it transition from its active state to one of rest." He didn't dismiss her anxieties. Instead, he acknowledged their power. He introduced her to the concept of a thought dump journal, a place where she could write down all her worries, her case notes, her to-do lists before bed. "Think of it," he explained, "as clearing the desk of your mind. Once it's all written down, you can tell yourself, this is handled for now. It will be there in the morning, but for tonight it rests." He also suggested a gentle, pre-sleep stretching routine, focusing on releasing physical tension that often held the mind captive. He recommended specific breathing exercises, techniques designed to activate the parasympathetic nervous system, the body's natural brake pedal for stress. It was a gradual process, and Anya was initially skeptical, accustomed to decisive action and immediate results. But John's patient, consistent guidance, and the small, incremental improvements she began to notice, a slightly longer stretch of uninterrupted sleep, a less frantic awakening, slowly began to build her trust. His afternoon was scheduled with Mr. David Chen, a former marathon runner whose sleep had been severely disrupted by chronic pain and the phantom aches of past injuries. David struggled with falling asleep due to discomfort and often woke multiple times during the night, his body feeling stiff and unrested. John's approach with David was different, focusing on physical comfort and pain management strategies that supported sleep. "The pain is real, David," John acknowledged, "and we're not trying to ignore it. We're trying to create an environment and a routine where your body feels safe enough to enter a state of deep rest, despite the discomfort." He researched specialized pillows and mattress toppers, suggesting David explore options that offered targeted support. He introduced gentle, low-impact exercises that could be performed before bed, focusing on improving circulation and releasing muscle tension without exacerbating pain. He also discussed the impact of diet, suggesting anti-inflammatory foods and mindful hydration, always emphasizing that these were complementary strategies, not cures. John's lunch breaks were his quiet sanctuary, a time to process the day's interactions and to recharge his own energy. He'd often find a quiet corner in a botanical garden, surrounded by the silent, steady growth of plants, a natural counterpoint to the often turbulent human experiences he encountered. He'd sketch in his notebook, not just observations about his clients, but reflections on the nature of sleep itself, its restorative power, its mysterious depths, its fundamental role in human health and well-being. His research into sleep was eclectic and deep. He wasn't just reading about the latest scientific papers on REM cycles and sleep spindles, though he absorbed that information avidly. He also delved into historical accounts of sleep practices across cultures, from the polyphasic sleep patterns of ancient societies to the communal sleeping arrangements of certain tribes. He believed that understanding how humans had slept throughout history offered valuable insights into our innate biological needs, often obscured by the demands of modern life. He was particularly fascinated by the concept of siesta cultures and the idea that a midday period of rest wasn't a sign of laziness, but a biologically opportune time for rejuvenation. The late afternoons were a time for synthesis. He'd review the research, connect it to his client sessions, and refine his strategies. He kept meticulous records, not just of sleep duration, but of the quality of sleep, the client's subjective experience, and the environmental factors that seem to influence their rest. This data-driven approach, combined with his empathetic understanding, formed the core of his practice. As evening approached, John's focus shifted inward, preparing himself for his own transition into rest. His apartment became his personal sleep laboratory. The lighting softened, electronics were powered down, and a gentle, calming scent, perhaps a subtle blend of lavender and bergamot, would fill the air. He believed in the power of sensory cues to signal to the brain that it was time to wind down. His own wind-down routine was a ritual perfected over years. A warm bath, infused with Epsom salts to ease any lingering muscle tension. Then, a period of reading, not for information, but for immersion. He'd choose novels that offered a sense of peace, stories that didn't demand intense cognitive engagement but allowed his mind to drift gently. He consciously avoided anything that might trigger anxiety or stress, a skill honed through years of helping others manage their own restless minds. Tonight, he was reading a collection of essays on the quiet beauty of nature. The author's descriptions of dew-kissed spiderwebs and the silent unfolding of a fern frond resonated with John's own appreciation for the subtle wonders of the world, the very wonders that often went unnoticed in the rush of modern life. He found that focusing on these small, quiet details helped to quiet the internal chatter, to bring his awareness back to the simple, steady rhythm of his own being. When he finally slipped into bed, it wasn't with the dread of another sleepless night, but with a quiet anticipation of rest. He understood the science, he respected the complexity, but he also embraced the innate restorative power of sleep. He would focus on his breath, the gentle in and out, a natural anchor in the quiet darkness. He wasn't trying to force sleep, but rather to create the conditions where it could naturally arise. His clients' struggles, their anxieties, their sleepless nights, they all informed his own understanding, but they didn't intrude upon his personal peace. He had learned to compartmentalize, to hold space for their challenges without allowing them to infiltrate his own sanctuary of rest. He was John, the sleep herder, a quiet shepherd guiding his flock towards the peaceful meadows of slumber. And in the gentle darkness, he too found his way, a silent, contented traveler in the land of dreams, ready to greet the next dawn and continue his gentle work. His life was a testament to the profound, often underestimated power of rest, a quiet dedication to helping others find solace in the universal experience of sleep. The city outside, now a muted hum, seemed to mirror his own internal state, a world quieting down, preparing for its own nightly repose. And John, the sleep herder, was a silent, steadfast guardian of that transition. The next day dawned with the same gentle insistence, the pearlescent gray light filtering through John's meticulously prepared window treatments. His internal rhythm, finely tuned over years of dedicated practice, recognized the subtle shift, the invitation to begin anew. The cool glass of water, the unhurried walk through his tranquil apartment, the precise adjustments to the environment, these were not mere habits, but deliberate rituals, each designed to cultivate the optimal state for his unique profession. He saw his own well-being as the foundation upon which he built his ability to help others find theirs. A frayed conductor couldn't guide a harmonious orchestra, and a sleep-deprived sleep herder would be ineffective indeed. His breakfast was the same simple oatmeal, the same precisely brewed chamomile tea. He found a profound comfort in this predictability. In a world filled with the unpredictable anxieties and sleep disruptions of his clients, his own unwavering routine was a source of stability, a quiet anchor. It allowed him to approach each new day, each new client, with a clear, unburdened mind, ready to listen without the noise of his own internal disruptions. Mid-morning found him preparing for his session with Mr. Henderson, a retired history professor whose nights were plagued by restless leg syndrome. The constant, involuntary twitching and discomfort made falling asleep a nightly battle, leaving him feeling groggy and irritable. Mr. Henderson, a man accustomed to meticulous research and logical deduction, found the irrational nature of his sleep disorder deeply frustrating. "It's as if my legs have a mind of their own, John," Mr. Henderson explained, his voice laced with exasperation. "I'm exhausted, utterly bone-weary, but these infernal spasms keep me from finding any peace. I've tried everything, stretching, cutting out caffeine, warm baths, but nothing seems to truly help." John listened patiently, his brow furrowed in concentration. He understood that restless leg syndrome, while having physiological components, was often exacerbated by psychological factors. The frustration, the anxiety about not sleeping, the feeling of helplessness. He proposed a multi-pronged approach. Firstly, he suggested a detailed tracking log, not just of sleep duration, but of the frequency and intensity of the leg movements, as well as dietary intake, particularly focusing on iron and magnesium levels, which could sometimes play a role. Sometimes, John explained, understanding the pattern is the first step to disrupting it. Let's gather as much information as we can, systematically. Think of it as researching a particularly stubborn historical enigma. He also introduced Mr. Henderson to progressive muscle relaxation, a technique that involved consciously tensing and then releasing different muscle groups throughout the body. The goal was to build awareness of physical tension and then to cultivate a deep sense of release. For the specific issue of restless legs, John suggested a gentle, rhythmic leg massage before bed, and perhaps a light, repetitive activity, like knitting or sorting small objects, that could provide a gentle, distracting stimulus without being overly stimulating. He emphasized that the goal wasn't to eliminate the sensations entirely, but to manage them, to reduce their disruptive power. His afternoon might involve a virtual session with a young entrepreneur, Sarah, who was constantly on the go, juggling multiple time zones and a demanding workload. Sarah's sleep was chaotic, often interrupted by late-night calls and early morning flights. John's challenge with Sarah was to help her establish some semblance of routine in a life that was inherently unpredictable. "It feels impossible, John," Sarah confessed, her voice weary even through the video call. "I'm in London one week, Tokyo the next. How can I possibly have a consistent sleep schedule?" John acknowledged the difficulty but didn't dismiss the possibility. Consistency doesn't always mean the exact same hours every single night, Sarah, he explained. It can also mean consistency in your pre-sleep ritual, regardless of where you are or what time it is, creating a portable wind-down routine. He worked with Sarah to develop a set of simple, adaptable practices she could perform anywhere. A specific sequence of stretching exercises, a guided meditation accessible via an app, a travel-sized aromatherapy diffuser with a calming scent. He also emphasized the importance of strategic napping when possible, and the need to be mindful of light exposure, suggesting she use blackout eye masks during flights and prioritize natural light exposure upon waking in a new time zone. It was about creating pockets of predictability within a life of constant flux. John's lunch breaks continued to be his time for quiet contemplation and research. He'd often visit a small, independent bookstore, browsing through volumes on sleep science, history, and psychology. He found that physical books offered a different kind of engagement than digital screens. Their tactile presence and the scent of paper and ink contributing to his sense of calm. He was particularly drawn to older texts, seeking wisdom that transcended the latest trends and fads. He believed that the fundamental principles of healthy sleep were timeless, even if the challenges varied across eras. His research into historical sleep patterns led him to explore the concept of segmented sleep, where individuals would sleep for a few hours, wake for a period of activity or quiet contemplation, and then sleep for a second segment. While not advocating for a return to such a practice in modern society, he found it fascinating that our ancestors might have had a different relationship with the night, one that wasn't solely defined by a single, consolidated block of unconsciousness. This sparked ideas about how fragmented sleep could be better managed, how those waking hours could be used constructively for relaxation rather than anxious rumination. The late afternoons were dedicated to synthesizing his findings, connecting the dots between scientific research, historical practices, and the individual needs of his clients. He maintained a comprehensive database of his client sessions, anonymizing the data to protect privacy, but allowing him to identify broader trends and common challenges. This data helped him refine his approaches, identifying which strategies were most effective for different types of sleep disturbances. As evening approached, John's focus turned inward, preparing himself for his own transition into rest. His apartment, a sanctuary of calm, was meticulously maintained. The lighting was always soft and warm, the temperature consistently cool. He adhered to a strict no-screen policy for at least an hour before bed, finding that the blue light emitted by digital devices was a significant disruptor of melatonin production. Instead, he'd engage in quiet, contemplative activities. His own wind-down routine was a carefully choreographed sequence of calming practices. A warm shower, its temperature set to a comforting warmth, not scalding heat. Then, a period of reading, often delving into poetry or philosophical texts that offered gentle contemplation rather than demanding intellectual engagement. Tonight, he was reading Rilke, his verses on solitude and inner peace resonating deeply with John's own philosophy. The goal of his routine wasn't to force sleep, but to create an environment and a mindset conducive to its natural arrival. He understood that sleep was not something to be conquered, but something to be invited, to be welcomed. He treated his own body and mind with the same respect and gentle guidance he offered his clients. As he finally lay down in his cool, dark room, John didn't focus on the mechanics of sleep. He didn't analyze his breathing patterns or count his sheep. Instead, he surrendered. He allowed the quiet of the night to envelop him, letting go of the day's observations and analyses. He was John, the sleep herder, and in the profound silence of the night, he too found his peaceful passage into the realm of dreams. His life was a quiet dedication to a fundamental human need, a gentle reminder that in the often frenetic pace of modern existence, the profound power of rest remained an essential, transformative force. The city's muted hum outside his window was a comforting presence, a reminder of the shared human experience of seeking repose. And John, the sleep herder, was a quiet guardian of that universal journey into the night. His work was a gentle art, a subtle science, and a profound act of care, all dedicated to the simple yet vital pursuit of a good night's sleep. The following morning, the gentle gray light began its familiar ascent, a silent summons that John met with his customary quietude. The cool glass of water, the mindful walk, the environmental checks, these were more than just steps in a routine. They were acts of self-stewardship, essential for maintaining the clarity and calm he brought to his clients. He understood that his own equilibrium was the bedrock of his practice, a non-negotiable foundation. A serene conductor was needed to coax harmony from a restless orchestra, and John, the sleep herder, was no different. His life was a testament to the idea that to guide others towards rest, one must first cultivate it within oneself. His breakfast remained a steadfast pillar of his day. The unadorned oatmeal, the precisely steeped chamomile tea. This consistency wasn't born of rigidity, but of a deep understanding of his own physiology and psychology. In a world often characterized by unpredictable demands and external pressures, his personal routine was a sanctuary, a predictable constant that allowed him to approach each client with a centered and receptive mind. It was a quiet assertion of control over the fundamental aspects of his own well-being, enabling him to offer that same guidance to others. By mid-morning, John was ready for his next appointment, this time with a young artist named Clara, whose creative process was being severely hampered by vivid, intrusive nightmares. Clara, a painter known for her vibrant, abstract canvases, found her nights filled with disturbing imagery that bled into her waking hours, stifling her inspiration and leaving her feeling drained. Unlike Mr. Henderson's physical discomfort or Ms. Sharma's racing thoughts, Clara's struggle was rooted in the subconscious, a realm John approached with particular delicacy. "It's like my own mind is betraying me, John," Clara explained, her voice soft, almost hesitant. "The colors I use during the day, they twist into something dark and unsettling at night. I wake up feeling tainted." John listened with his characteristic empathy, observing Clara's pensive demeanor and the subtle shadows beneath her eyes. He understood that creative minds often possessed a heightened sensitivity, and that their subconscious could be particularly active. He didn't attempt to interpret the content of her nightmares, recognizing that this was a complex psychological landscape best navigated with caution. Instead, he focused on building a bridge between her waking and sleeping states, creating a more gentle transition. He introduced Clara to the concept of dream incubation, a gentle way of influencing the subconscious by focusing on a specific intention or desired outcome before sleep. For Clara, this meant visualizing positive imagery, focusing on the serene colors and abstract forms that inspired her during the day. He encouraged her to keep a bedside sketchbook, not to analyze her nightmares, but to simply draw or paint whatever images arose upon waking, regardless of their nature. The act of externalizing these subconscious images, he explained, could help to process them, to lessen their power. Think of your sketchbook, John suggested gently, as a safe space for these images. You can observe them, acknowledge them, but you don't have to be consumed by them. It's a way of saying, I see you, but I am in control of my waking world. He also recommended a gentle evening ritual involving listening to calming instrumental music or ambient nature sounds, subtle auditory cues designed to signal to the brain that it was time to shift from wakefulness to a more receptive, dreamlike state. It was about creating a gentle descent, rather than a sudden plunge into the unknown. His afternoon might involve a session with a father of 3 young children, Mark, who was struggling with chronic sleep deprivation due to the demands of his young family. Mark's sleep was fragmented, interrupted by nighttime feedings, childhood illnesses, and the general chaos of raising young children. His problem was less about falling asleep and more about the sheer lack of sustained, restorative rest. It feels like a constant battle, John, Mark confessed, exhaustion etched onto his face. By the time I get a few hours in, it's already time to get up again. I'm running on fumes. John acknowledged the immense challenge Mark faced, recognizing that immediate solutions were unlikely. His approach with Mark focused on maximizing the quality of the sleep he did get and on building resilience. He discussed the importance of sleep hygiene in the context of a chaotic household, creating the darkest possible sleeping environment, minimizing screen time before bed even if it was only for 30 minutes, and prioritizing any opportunity for rest, even short naps during the day if possible. He also introduced Mark to techniques for improving sleep efficiency. The ratio of time spent asleep to time spent in bed. This involved encouraging Mark to be more consistent with his wake-up time, even on weekends, as this helped to regulate his body's internal clock. He also discussed the importance of managing his stress levels, suggesting simple, short mindfulness exercises that could be done even amidst the demands of childcare. It was about finding small pockets of calm and prioritizing them, recognizing that perfect sleep was an unlikely goal, but significant improvement was achievable. John's lunch breaks remained his personal time for reflection and research. He'd often seek out quiet, natural spaces, finding inspiration in the steady, unhurried rhythms of the natural world. He observed how plants grew, how water flowed, how seasons changed, all processes guided by an innate cyclical order. This observation of natural rhythms often informed his understanding of human sleep cycles, reminding him that our bodies, too, were designed to follow certain patterns. His research extended to the impact of light, natural and artificial, on sleep. He delved into studies on circadian rhythms, the body's internal clock, and the crucial role of light exposure in regulating sleep-wake cycles. He learned about the sensitivity of the eyes to blue light and the ways in which modern technology, from smartphones to LED lighting, could disrupt these natural processes. This knowledge informed his recommendations for his clients, emphasizing the importance of creating dim, warm lighting in the evenings and seeking out natural sunlight in the mornings. The late afternoons were a time for synthesis, for connecting the dots between his client sessions, his research, and his own accumulated wisdom. He would meticulously document each session, noting the strategies employed, the client's responses, and any emergent patterns. This ongoing collection of data allowed him to continuously refine his approach, tailoring his guidance to the specific needs of each individual. He saw himself as a perpetual student, always learning, always adapting. As evening approached, John's focus shifted inward, preparing himself for his own transition into rest. His apartment, a sanctuary of calm, became his personal sleep laboratory. The lighting was carefully managed, electronics were put away, and a subtle, calming aroma, perhaps a blend of sandalwood and cedarwood, would gently permeate the air. These sensory cues were deliberate signals to his brain, a gentle handover from the demands of the day to the restorative embrace of the night. His own wind-down routine was a practice in conscious deceleration. A warm shower, designed to gradually lower his body temperature, a physiological cue for sleep. Then, a period of reading, selecting works that offered a sense of quiet contemplation, books that allowed his mind to wander gently rather than becoming intensely engaged. Tonight, he was revisiting a collection of essays on the philosophy of stillness, finding solace in the author's exploration of finding peace amidst the chaos of existence. When he finally lay down in his cool, dark bedroom, John didn't strive for sleep. He welcomed it. He focused on the gentle rhythm of his breath, the subtle rise and fall of his chest, allowing the day's thoughts and observations to drift away like clouds. He understood that sleep was not a performance to be achieved, but a natural process to be allowed. He was John, the sleep herder, and in the quiet sanctuary of his own making, he too found his peaceful passage into the land of dreams, ready to greet the dawn and continue his gentle work of guiding others towards their own restorative slumber. His life, dedicated to the often unseen art of sleep, was a quiet yet profound contribution to the well-being of those around him, a subtle reminder of the fundamental importance of rest in the tapestry of human experience. The city outside, now a muted hum, seemed to breathe with him, a collective exhale into the embrace of the night. and John, the sleep herder, was a quiet sentinel in this universal transition. The cycle of dawn, water, mindful movement, and quiet breakfast repeated, each element a precisely placed stone in the foundation of John's day. His apartment remained a sanctuary, its atmosphere a carefully curated blend of coolness, stillness, and subtle, calming scents. He understood that for his clients, these environmental factors were crucial, but for himself, they were also a form of self-regulation, a daily reaffirmation of his commitment to balance. The world outside his windows might be stirring with the usual urban cacophony, but within his walls, a profound sense of peace prevailed, a necessary prerequisite for the empathetic work he undertook. His first client of the day was a young programmer, Alex, whose sleep was fragmented by intense, often illogical nightmares. Alex described waking in a cold sweat, his heart pounding, haunted by disjointed images and a pervasive sense of unease. Unlike Clara, the artist, Alex's nightmares felt less like creative subconscious expressions and more like intrusive, anxiety-driven intrusions. John recognized the need for a different approach, one that focused on grounding and cognitive restructuring. "Alex," John began, his voice gentle but firm, "these nightmares, they feel very real when you're experiencing them. But upon waking, you're aware they are not reality. That awareness is your anchor." He introduced Alex to a technique called imagery rehearsal therapy, a method used to consciously rescript distressing dreams. "Before you go to sleep tonight," John instructed, "I want you to vividly imagine a different ending to the dream you most commonly experience. Visualize it unfolding in a way that feels safe, that feels resolved. If the nightmare does occur, try to recall the rescripted version, to introduce that altered narrative into your consciousness." He also worked with Alex on developing a more robust pre-sleep routine, emphasizing the importance of avoiding stimulating content, intense video games, action-packed movies, or stressful news in the hours leading up to bedtime. He suggested Alex create a calm-down kit, a small collection of items designed to evoke feelings of peace. A soft blanket, a comforting book, perhaps a small, smooth worry stone. The aim was to create a tangible buffer between the demands of the day and the vulnerability of sleep. John's afternoon might involve a session with a middle-aged woman, Mrs. Peterson, who suffered from a peculiar form of insomnia, where she would wake consistently at precisely 3:17 a.m., wide awake and unable to fall back asleep for hours. This precise timing suggested a disruption in her circadian rhythm, but also hinted at a learned association, her mind anticipating and even triggering wakefulness at that specific hour. "It's like a tiny alarm clock goes off in my head," Mrs. Peterson explained, her frustration evident. "And once it's set off, I'm just awake, lying there listening to the house creak, counting the minutes until morning." John acknowledged the commonality of middle-of-the-night awakenings. His strategy with Mrs. Peterson involved a combination of sleep restriction therapy, a technique that initially limits time in bed to improve sleep efficiency and stimulus control. The bed, John explained, should be associated with sleep, and only sleep. If you find yourself awake for more than 20 minutes, unable to fall back asleep, I want you to get out of bed. Go to another room. Engage in a quiet, non-stimulating activity, perhaps reading a dull book under dim light, until you feel genuinely sleepy, then return to bed. He also worked with her to create a more gradual transition out of sleep. Instead of jarringly leaping out of bed, he encouraged a few minutes of quiet breathing or gentle stretching while still in bed, allowing her body and mind to slowly reorient themselves to wakefulness. He addressed the environmental factors as well, ensuring her bedroom was as dark and quiet as possible, and exploring the potential impact of subtle nighttime disturbances, like a dripping faucet or a distant street light. John's lunch breaks were often spent in quiet contemplation, observing the world around him. He'd sit in a park, watching children play, their energy boundless and unrestrained, a stark contrast to the world of sleep he inhabited. He'd observe the steady flow of traffic, the murmur of conversations, noting the underlying rhythms of human activity. These observations, seemingly disconnected from his work, often provided him with subtle insights into the human condition, the universal need for both engagement and repose. His research continued to expand, delving deeper into the neurobiology of sleep. He read studies on the glymphatic system, the brain's waste clearance mechanism that is most active during sleep, and the intricate dance of neurotransmitters like serotonin, dopamine, and melatonin that regulate our sleep-wake cycles. He was fascinated by the profound restorative power of sleep, how it was not merely an absence of consciousness, but a vital, active process essential for cognitive function, emotional regulation, and physical health. He saw sleep as the ultimate reset button, a daily opportunity for the body and mind to repair, consolidate, and prepare for the challenges ahead. The late afternoons were a time for integration, for weaving together the threads of scientific knowledge, historical perspective, and the individual narratives of his clients. He meticulously documented his strategies, noting the subtle shifts in his clients' sleep patterns, their subjective experiences, and any environmental or behavioral changes that seemed to influence their progress. This ongoing process of data collection and analysis allowed him to continuously refine his understanding and adapt his approach. As evening approached, John's focus shifted inward, preparing himself for his own transition into rest. His apartment, a sanctuary of calm, became his personal haven. The lighting softened, electronics were powered down, and a subtle, calming aroma Perhaps a gentle blend of lavender and valerian root would begin to fill the air. He saw this as a crucial step, a signal to his own system that the active part of his day was drawing to a close, and that it was time to shift gears. His own wind-down routine was a practiced art, a series of deliberate actions designed to promote relaxation and prepare his body and mind for sleep. A warm shower, a gentle massage of his feet and neck, followed by a period of reading. Tonight, he chose a collection of classic short stories, tales that offered gentle narratives without demanding intense emotional engagement. He found that stories with a sense of quiet resolution were particularly effective in helping him to detach from the day's complexities. When he finally lay down in his cool, dark bedroom, John didn't actively pursue sleep. He simply created the conditions for it. He focused on the sensation of his body settling into the mattress, the gentle rhythm of his breath, allowing himself to simply be present in the quiet darkness. He understood that sleep, like many natural processes, could be elusive when pursued too forcefully. It was best approached with patience and acceptance. He was John, the sleep herder, a quiet guide in the often turbulent journey towards rest. His work was a subtle art, a patient observation of human rhythms, and a deep respect for the restorative power of sleep. As the city outside continued its nocturnal hum, John, like many of his clients, surrendered to the gentle call of the night, finding his own peaceful passage into the realm of dreams, ready to greet the dawn and continue his essential work, helping others find their way back to the vital embrace of a good night's sleep. His life was a quiet dedication to a fundamental human need, a constant reminder that in the relentless pursuit of productivity and engagement, the restorative power of sleep remained an indispensable, transformative force. The gentle hum of the city was no longer a distraction, but a familiar lullaby, a collective sigh of a world settling into its nightly repose, a rhythm John understood and honored.